Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's table talk about homeschooling. The subject topic for today is educational milestones and documentation. We are going to go ahead and get started, and I will have our two panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why they started homeschooling, just to get us off to a good start. All right.
Hi, I'm Faith Willibum, and I am a veteran homeschooler. I have 4 kids who have graduated, and we started homeschooling later. The kids were in upper elementary and middle school when we started homeschooling all the way until they graduated from high school. And the reason we chose to homeschool is we could see that it was hard on our family for everyone to go their separate ways every day and then expect to be close and know each other well and have all these great memories together. And so we also saw, that the kids are very susceptible to what other people are doing and thinking. And, we wanted our moral value system to be predominant in their mind while they were young, because we knew that as they get older, they would learn a lot of other things. So we wanted to have greater influence on their character and their academics and give them more opportunities for flexibility to do more sports, more activities, and do schoolwork, but do a whole lot more than that as well.
Okay, I'm Angela. I've been homeschooling since the beginning. My girls are, I said since beginning of time, no. My girls are 10 and 12, and we homeschool because we just, we want to instill our values into our children. We want to give them the gift of time so they can learn on their timetable, and then also just to spend time together as a family. My husband's schedule is crazy, and I think, if they went to school, there would have been a time at one job that he had, they would have probably never seen their dad because of his schedule. But it's really allowed for flexibility and vacations and things like that.
Great. All right, so we're going to start from the kind of the first part with documentation. So notice of intent, my understanding is kind of where you start with this. So can you guys talk a little bit about notice of intent?
Okay, notice of intent in Virginia, I can't speak for other places, is due August 15th, right? They have, so your proof of progress is, which I know we'll talk about, that is due August 1st, and then notice of intent is due August 15th. And so I always get the two confused. So I just send everything in by August 1st because then I know I'm covered. For your notice of intent, I would suggest that you go to the HEAVE website. HEAVE is going to have on there what is required by law. A lot of school districts are going to ask you things that are not required by law. Also, I find a lot of school districts are now also going to online forms for you to fill out, and they're asking things that they can't lawfully ask you. And so as homeschoolers, we want to be careful that we don't overshare information. A lot of people are like, what's the big deal? We just give them a little extra information. We want to protect homeschooling. And so we don't want to give them more than they need. If people start doing that, then we believe that they're going to ask for more and more and more stuff. So we want to just stick to the basics, stick to the laws. So it's good to know your homeschooling laws. So they're not overstepping, and and some of them, they just don't know, so it's not like a lot of these people are doing this vindictively. They don't know the homeschooling law. And so that's why it's good for you to know so you can educate them. But the first thing that I did was go to the HEAVE site. I mean, my district sends me a notice of intent form. You don't have to use that form. I print out the notice of intent form. There are 4 choices. I don't know how detailed you want me to get on here, but there are 4 choices on there that you can choose from. A lot of people might not know this, but if you have a GED, you can't homeschool under the high school diploma choice. So the parent would choose an option. I have a homeschool diploma or a high school diploma, different. So if you have a GED, you can't choose that option. That does not mean that you cannot homeschool your child. Okay. If I could, I mean, I called up my form here. I was just going to go through the choices real quick. So the first one is that you have a high school diploma, and you would have to show them a copy of your high school diploma, which, you know, who has that, right? But the other option is that you, let's see, sorry, it's so small on my phone. If you are a licensed teacher, you can choose that option. Also, let's see here. It says, I have provided a program of study or curriculum delivered through a correspondence course, distance learning program, or in another manner. So there are online schools, you know, that you could do. I've attached, sorry, to this notice of intent that I am able to provide an adequate education for my children. So if you had a GED, you could pick that option. So I have a master's, so I just put a, you know, copy of my master's on there. And then every year I just say on file. I don't keep sending them a copy of my master's degree. And it can be either parent and or guardian. So like if the mom has a GED and the dad has an associate, you could just use the dad if you want, or you could choose a different option. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the one who's going to be doing the majority of the homeschooling. So when you do notice of intent as a teacher, if you're a certified teacher, my certification ran out. And so I, you know, I was like, I'm going to renew this, but with a toddler and a baby, it just, you know, it didn't happen. But if you choose that option, it's different when it comes to the, like, you don't have to do a proof of progress, because then you're kind of basically a personal tutor for your child. And so there are a lot of options there. Anyone who wants to homeschool is able to homeschool. So don't think like, you know, I know Holly has said before, you know, you don't have to have an education degree to homeschool your child. You don't have to have a high school diploma to homeschool your child. And so I don't want anyone to think, you know, I'm less than, you know, for some reason. If you want to do it, there's a way. So I hope that was a long answer, but I hope that answers it.
No, goes over a lot. Anything to add, Faith?
I was going to say, Angela, you mentioned Heave. That's HEAV.org, or is it com? It's one of those two.
And I will be
ORG. Okay.
Yes, and I will be putting the links for that on next to the recordings of this one, as well as on our actual homeschooling page on our website for anyone who needs to reference that. All right. Great. So that's the notice of intent. Let's jump into proof of progress. How did you guys, what did you guys do for proof of progress?
Well, basically what I did for my kids is created a portfolio for each year, which had a school calendar, a listing of books read, course descriptions with materials used, samples of my child's best work, had grades, grading scales. I could write down any projects or achievements, volunteer hours, if applicable. I mean, that's more like a high school level thing, club, sport, things of that nature. So it's kind of like a 3-ring binder is very helpful. You can also go to something like homeschoolplanet.com or another online source and just keep it all online, so you don't have to have the clutter and the paperwork. And then you can just copy your, you know, if it's a special, I don't know, a paper that they have written, their child has written, or something special you want to keep, you can just upload it to that website. So you can do it manually, you can do it online. But basically through daily conversations and applications, you get a feel for where they're at. There's also like assessments and graded performance. Basically, when you're going through curriculum, you work through a chapter or a certain segment, and there's usually quizzes and then eventually there's a test. And so you have just graded performance through the basic assignments, quizzes, tests, which then when they're like 3rd through 12th grade can be converted to quarterly grades, semester grades, yearly grades. And then at the end of the year, you have standardized testing, like the Iowa test or the CAT/Terranova test is really good. Yeah, so that's just my general overview of keeping track of things. Like either physically, you have a binder to track that school year for them, or you have something online or a software program. Yeah, just so you can keep track of things, and that's applicable kindergarten through 12th grade.
Great. Angela, anything to add or different that you do?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm like on the other end. Like I haven't started like grades and stuff like that, and so my oldest is 12. We work to master, and so I don't I don't say you got a 90% or you got you got an A or something. I know as she gets older and we'll need like a high school transcript, that's going to have to change. So if you're doing kind of like unschooling, you're not going to necessarily have a bunch of papers and workbooks and stuff. And so a way that you can document what you're doing is, you can do videos, you can take pictures. It could be a video of your child talking about what they've been learning, about that week. You can do that for yourself. Now, for the proof of progress at the end of the year, you can do, if you have a private tutor, you don't have to submit like a proof of progress, but you can do a CAT test, like Faith mentioned. The Iowa tests are different achievement tests out there. We only have to turn in scores for math and language arts. So some of those tests include other subjects. I typically go with, or I have always gone actually with the CAT test. It's easy. I've done the paper test. I've done the timed test, the paper time test. I've done online untimed. So we've kind of tried it all. You gotta know your student. You gotta know your child, what works best for them. My oldest, she loves doing worksheets and tests and stuff like that. And so she was so excited, I get to take this test, and again, make learning fun, right? That's been my motto through all of this. But when she found out it was timed, she was trying to beat the time. And I'm like, no, it's not, you have 20 minutes to finish this section. And she's like, yes, I'm done. How much time is on the timer? It's like, no, or that's not the point here. And so it doesn't matter if it's timed or untimed for you to turn it in. And so I'm like, I'm going to go with the untimed because I really want her to focus on the answers and not, the time of things. I still tried that you start and I'll tell you when to stop, but she was still worried about the time. So for my oldest, I've done the CAT test. I kind of see the proof of progress as a hoop to jump through. I know what my child needs to work on. Last year, because of COVID and everything, we didn't have to turn in proof of progress. And me trying to keep things as normal as possible, I was like, should I do the CAT test? Should I not? And she asked me about it. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And I said, we already know what you need to work on. What areas you need to work on. She took the test and she did well, but her quote unquote weaker areas were what we had identified before she even took the test. So that was kind of cool, especially now that she's older. She's like, yeah, I thought I might have some trouble in, in this area or that area. So you have to get a STAY-9 of 4 or higher, a composite score of your math and language arts to count as passing. And then you would just turn in your composite score. Again, don't turn in more than you need to. And you can't, it's highly recommended not to blacken out things. I feel like when you get like a government document, they're like, they don't need this, they don't need that. And I actually did that at the beginning of homeschooling. I said, they don't need this score and this score. And I blacked it out with Sharpie and everything. That could be frowned upon because that could be seen as altering the test results, even though I didn't do anything to that composite score. So I know, especially with CAT, you can ask specifically for a composite score sheet, and it will just say, composite score. I mean, there's some other information on there, 5, and then that's all you need to send in. For my youngest, I've done evaluations with her. I have a co-op, and so there was a mom in our co-op who got to see my child on a regular basis several times a week. So I didn't have a portfolio per se, but she got to see her. You know, we did a writing class and a science class and things like that. And I gave her a list of some of the things that we were working on at home. And she sat down with her and just talked to her and did some fun, not almost like games, you know, like she always, oh, I can't wait to, you know, meet with Miss Ellen, you know, again, she thought it was fun. And she would just ask her a couple of things, and I'd let them have their little meeting, and then she would write me a letter. In order to do an evaluation, the person has to have a master's degree. And I think it just says disciplinary or interdisciplinary subject, which is basically any subject. And so she just has been writing the letter for me. For my youngest, you can write an evaluation letter for your own child. It's not illegal, you know, if you have a master's. But, you know, they just suggest that you get someone who's not related, so you can kind of have a impartial view of your child's progress. I've also HSLDA is another organization that I'm part of. That, you know, I've talked with, and, you know, they're like, legally, they can't say you can't write an evaluation, you know, for your child. But so that's another option as
But
well.
I think it's healthy to have checks and balances and to have another person give feedback on your child. I think it's healthy for the child. I think it's healthy for the teacher. So I like that idea.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I just was thinking, you know, if you're in a situation where, you know, it's getting late in the year, or you can't get to someone and you have a master's, like maybe you just, you know, go ahead and write the letter or something. And it depends on, I mean, my youngest has also done the CAT test, and she did well, but she's just not as much as a testing kind of girl than my oldest. And there's going to be stuff on these assessment tests that your child doesn't know, and that's okay. I think it's good to tell your child that ahead of time. Again, depending on your child, because I think they might go, I didn't know some of this stuff. You know, we're not teaching to the test. I'm not going to get into that whole subject, but we're not teaching to the test. We're teaching them, you know, how to test. And throughout the year, you've probably touched on those main things. They do have practice tests, I know, through CAT. I don't know about the other tests. Or if you want to pay the money, you know, you can buy a practice test for your child to try it out. I mean, they need to know how to take a test, and that's different than knowing what's actually on the test too. So, you know,
ideally they should know both, though.
Well, right. So, I mean, it's when you have a 7-year-old who has to take a standardized test, who has never taken a test before, you know, like, that's sad to me. I'm like, they're just turned 7, you know. So you might want to go an evaluation route just because they are younger. But they need to know, if they're doing the paper test, how to fill in the bubble, you know, or if you're doing the online test, don't say finished if you're not finished, you know. But even with the online for the CAT test, you don't have to sit and do it all in one day. You know, you can go back and log in, you know, so it's not like this 12 hours of testing that you have to do with your child. But I think that kind of covers proof of progress. Holly, if I could just jump back to the notice of intent, they do ask for a list of your curriculum. And so I get a lot of new homeschool parents have asked me, they're like, okay, so like, what do I need to like put on there? Do I need to say I'm using My Father's World or Abeka, or no? Like, I basically just write like the core subjects down, you know, math, science, language arts, history. You know, you might want to throw music or Bible on there or whatever, but it's literally just a list. You know, so again, you don't want to give more information than you need to, so they don't need to know what curriculum you're using. You might change it. You know, we've talked about that. You might change it in the middle of the year. So it's just literally like those key, you know, your key subjects
subjects that you're going through, rather than how you're delivering those subjects.
Right. You know, when they get older, I might write like algebra down, or I might just say math. I mean, you know, but so yeah, it's nothing to stress out about.
And you know what? The reality is, you have to have an idea of what you're doing anyway for the school year. So it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
You have to have some kind of a math curriculum. You have to have some kind of a plan for science, some kind of plan, something, to address English, so it's not too hard.
It's not.
Great. So kind of building on, I had a note on here on how do you mark their progress? So, I mean, Faith, with your kids, they were older, so you were doing grading and all of that especially in preparation for transcripts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Angela, you're doing more evaluations. Is there any tips you can give parents or anything on marking progress? Or is it just kind of, as well as you can?
Angela and I are actually at the opposite ends of the spectrum. I think I'm more traditional in my approach. And I think, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, you're more non-traditional and unschooling method?
Yeah, well, unschooling Charlotte Mason-ish is kind of like.
Sure. I like Charlotte Mason. Absolutely. There, one of the best resources around is Homeschooling 101, or maybe it's 201 now, but it's by Kathy Duffy. And she goes over all these different styles. There's so many different ways to homeschool. There's many different kinds of curriculum. There's actually an evaluation in there to see how you as a parent, your tendency to teaching, to teach their tendencies, what your typical style is. There's also evaluations in there for kind of doing an assessment of your children to see how they like to learn the best. And then you can kind of do this little graph and see, based on their learning style, these types of curriculums might be really helpful. So there's a lot out there.
I think for Holly, where you were saying, if we're going through a book, like a math curriculum book, put the date on there, and then we can say, by this time of the year, we've covered this much sort of thing. I don't necessarily have a list, kind of like when they're younger, when they first walked and their first tooth, and stuff like that. I haven't done that, for schooling stuff. But, I think dating stuff is important. Even for younger kids, even, like preschool kids, just to track their development, if you date their drawings, so you can see how far they've come and how they draw people over the last 2 years or something. So dating stuff, finding a way to organize that, like Faith said, like in a binder. Papers. There's so many papers. I feel like I don't know. My girls like to draw, and there's just, I don't know. I just feel like there's papers and craft supplies everywhere. But trying to just keep things organized. If you have a nature journal, keep it dated. I like things that are bound and everything, stays together. I take a lot of pictures of stuff. When we're out and about and learning, because we do a lot of hands-on kinds of things. And again, they're still younger, when they are starting to get older, but when you're working towards a transcript, and things like that, you're going to want to have more, more of a record and, test dates, and things like that. But then again, on the flip side, I used to be a teacher, so I feel like I come from a traditional background, and I've surprised myself of where I am now and how I teach and what works for our family. I wanted that homeschool room and, and all of that stuff. And we are not like that. So, that's okay. I'm loving it. But, if you are unschooling, you're not doing a bunch of written tests, and things like that, that's okay too. So I don't want anyone to think, well, how can I do this if I'm unschooling, we don't have, I believe that your child is still going to do well on these, these CAT tests. There are other tests. I just say that one because that's the one that I've used. I do want to point out, if your child ever got lower than the fourth stay-9, don't send it in. You can go on homeschool probation.
25th percentile, isn't that?
For the fourth, yeah, I think it is. Most people, unless they, maybe they have a learning disability, or maybe they just didn't test well that day, they were in a mood, they picked A for everything, I don't know. But
made pictures instead of actually
Yeah,
answering questions.
you don't know, but never send in something lower than a 4, and I also don't want to say like the test is super easy, because there's a child who might struggle with it, and that doesn't mean that your child hasn't made progress for him or her, through the school year. Again, I just see it as a hoop to jump through. I'm not doing it to see where my child is per se, because I know pretty much where my child is and what her strengths and weaknesses are. If you don't, that's okay too, and and it might help you. But
I kind of look at it as kind of a skeleton. You know what I mean? We're so much more than a skeleton. We have the muscles, the skin, and we have hair. We're so much more than a skeleton. But I think the basic framework of like, around this age, these are some things to strive for with math. Generally, these are some things to kind of look at for science, whether it's a nature hike, whether it's a combination of different things. What's appropriate for their age? There's a lot of different ways things can be taught, but I think it's important to have a good skeleton, some basic ideas of what you're shooting for.
Definitely. And if you test early, if you're not sure how your child is going to do, and if they get a lower than a 4, that would give you time to still get like an evaluator together. And that's why it's good, like Faith said, even if that's not the route that you're going, just to keep some papers together, or your math book or whatever. If you decided to go that route, you would have something to show an evaluator. And evaluators the tests aren't that expensive in my opinion. Usually there's a coupon around the time of year where people, the $5 off, they're like $20, I think, for the CAT test anyway. And then evaluators, it can depend. I don't know, I think like $50.
I think it depends on where you live. I live in Northern Virginia. Everything is more expensive here.
Right.
Well, you do too.
I do. I've
Depends
seen
on who you know.
Yeah, if my friend wouldn't let me pay her, so if you know somebody, but I personally have not seen anyone advertise over $50. That doesn't mean that people don't charge more, but evaluators do fill up. It's a lot of work to go and and have your meeting, whether you're doing it Zoom or meeting in person or whatever. And so you can't wait till the last minute and say, okay, I need an evaluator, because they may not be available.
Great. So what about, and Angela, I'm not sure if you'll have done this yet, but I'm specifically thinking about some of the stuff that I went through in high school with projects, and, you had to complete a certain amount of projects. Although with when I was younger, there was like science projects that you had to complete as part of the curriculum. Do you guys do any of that type of stuff to help further along the documentation, or just to have those like milestones that the kids go through?
I've done the Hope Science Fair since my oldest was 5. I think was she 4 or 5? I don't know. And so for the younger group, for their science fair, you can do like a collection. So kids will bring in their stuffed animals or their Lego creations or stuff. It's just that idea of getting, how do we put a collection together? How are we going to display it? What are you going to share about it? And she has chosen to be judged every year that she has participated. And they compete against, children their own age in whatever category, there's experiments, projects, and then collections for the younger children. And so that's something that we really look forward to every year. You do not need to be part of Hope to be part of the science fair. So we're not like members in Hope, but we can still do the science fair. They didn't do it last year or this year, and so we really missed it. But, getting the trifold, which is available at the dollar store, by the way. It's very expensive at Staples. They're a little shorter, but for $1, but I just let them, even at, 5, 6, 7, they got to pick the topic. And, we talked about the, hypothesis and materials. And so we're weaving that in, but they got to choose whatever they wanted to do. And my youngest found a way to do something with elephants, I think for like 4 years. I don't know. She was just all about elephants. And so she found some way, you know, like, and 1 year she even did the elephant toothpaste. So it still had elephant in the title. Um, but we've done all kinds of things that's led into more learning at home, growing plants and what liquids, you know, is water the only thing that helps plants grow? Which microwave popcorn is the best? That was a lot of counting kernels. So we bought lots of different kinds of popcorn, popped them. Then we did it all for 3 minutes for each, you know, bag. So we had like Walmart and Orville Redenbacher or whatever it is. And they had to count all the kernels and then had to do, you can't just do one bag, right? So then, you know, you have to do, we have popcorn for days. But and they're doing public speaking, you know, because they're talking to again, both of them have actually chosen to be judged every time that they've gone. You don't have to be judged. You can just be there to show off your work. So they're talking to a judge, you know, and we've got they've won, I think, all the places at different years, you know, first, second, third. They get their certificate and they get their ribbon. And so that's something, you know, to keep in a portfolio or a scrapbook or something. And so that's, you know, that's fun. And we're also interacting with other homeschoolers and getting to see, you know, what other ideas are out there. And I want to do a robot next year like this, you know, like this person did. So right now at our level, that's the kind of stuff that we've been, the main thing, I think, outside of our normal stuff, that we've been doing. I've been wanting to do a show what you know with my homeschool co-op, and where they can just bring whatever they're working on at home at the time, and the same setup, you know, where they would have a table and show their things. It's fun to see what other homeschoolers are doing and, you know, how they're initiate's not the right word, but, you know, how they're implementing, you know, learning in their home to get ideas. And the kids, you know, we don't have a classroom of kids where they can stand up and, you know, and read their paper or, you know, or whatever. So it's fun to get together and to share, you know, to share what they're doing, and, you know, they're proud of their work. And so.
I love what you've done, Angela.
Oh,
I
thank
can
you.
imagine the popcorn counting.
Oh yeah, that was something.
It's really neat. You know, we've done the illustrating a book thing, writing a book. That was more middle school. My son started a business. It was a lawn mowing business, and he ended up doing 5th grade through 12th grade.
Wow.
And they don't get taxed when they're under 18 for that type of business. So he did really well, and he was able to, you know, pay for some of varsity soccer and some of the things that he wanted to go for that were more expensive. And one of my daughters started a knitting and craft club, because we wanted to have friends over more. We wanted to up the social life. So we just invited neighborhood girls over is what we focused on. And we had crafts and knitting every week and little snacks. And they were in charge of planning the activities and coming up with things. And I made the snacks. It was really fun. Yes, as they get older, I mean, there is a lot more papers and whatnot, but there's still like the science projects. And we were part of a co-op as well. And so they were still doing a few big projects, especially my daughter, who was in French. They did the trifold boards and they did presentations, things like moot court. We got to actually go and see the competitions. So I really appreciated doing the co-op. It was really special. So some projects we just take pictures of, and a few we saved or we just documented, but they're really the highlight. You know, I think it helps with morale. I think hands-on is always the best way to learn, and keeping morale up is so important, because when kids are motivated and they're happy with their learning, it's not that hard. It's a lot easier to get them to cooperate, and you don't have to feel like you're pushing a wet noodle.
Yeah, that's great.
One thing,
yeah.
sorry, Holly, I was gonna say what I'm planning for next year because they are getting older and I want them to work like in teams more and do things is we're gonna do, I think I'm gonna break it up into 3 months at a time, do a couple different subjects with our co-op. We're gonna do like a STEM kind of
Okay.
thing. And so they'll have to work in partners or teams. It depends how many people sign up to create different things. And so again, homeschoolers, they're not working in the group where, you're in charge of this and I'm in charge of that, unless you have a big enough family, but with just the two of us, that's not, and also she doesn't always want to be on her sister's team, and so, so that's another way that I'm looking to incorporate that, into our homeschooling. And then also, in my co-op is, because who doesn't like, making robots and the strongest bridge and, and all of these things,
Right.
to foster the teamwork and doing a team project versus just something that they do on their own.
Yeah, great. Let's switch up into, and Faith, this is probably going to be geared a bit more towards you. What did you do in order to prep them for college admissions? The SAT, PSAT, ACT, transcripts, kind of just an overview on that kind of thing.
Sure. With all four of my kids graduated from high school. We had a ceremony, they got their diploma, they had a transcript, and they had a resume with all their accomplishment, jobs, volunteer hours, etc. What do you do to help them prep for college admissions? I would say probably between 7th and 9th grade. As a parent, you want to start looking into things. You can go to heave.org and look at what the expectations are. There's different levels of ways to graduate. There's graduating with honors, and it depends. And then there's just regular graduation, and there's another type of graduation too. If your child is more hands-on and you really don't want to do as much testing, there's like 3 different levels. So you kind of are determining as a parent what track you want to go for and what kind of that'll determine the classes that you choose. I know I have a daughter who is in pre-med, so we had to really hoof it with the math and the sciences, and she was able to get through Calc 2 with the help of local community college her junior and senior year in high school. And because I really don't know how to do those. But that's because that was based on her goal. It depends on what the goal is. But just in general, studying for the PSAT test is really important. A lot of homeschool parents do not realize that they can start testing, sign their child up for the PSAT test as early as 9th grade. 9th grade, 10th grade. Most public schools are doing 9th and 10th grade as kind of a practice. The PSAT test counts towards the National Merit program, which is a scholarship program, the 11th grade year. So it's always given in October. So this is a test that's given once a year in October, typically. And the 11th grade year, so junior year, that test counts towards national merit. And the reason that's a big deal is if your child does well, there's like 3 different levels qualifying for national merit. It's one of the easiest ways to get scholarships or to get into some of the more challenging schools. But it's just great practice so that your student realizes that this isn't that big a deal, and you can buy a PSAT prep book online from Amazon. You can go to the local bookstore and see different PSAT prep books. You can go online. You can sign up to get you can sign up, and I encourage you to do that. Register with SAT and for the ACT test. You can get an SAT test question sent to you on your phone every day. to kind of get your mind thinking analytically. Basically, whether or not to do the SAT versus the ACT, the statistics show that it's basically 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. 1/3 of students do better on the SAT compared to the ACT. Another third do better on the ACT versus the SAT. And the other third, it's about equal when they take the test. But sometimes, parents have to look at the way the test is set up. With the ACT, they get less time, but they have 4 different subject areas that they go over versus the SAT. They get a little bit more time to answer each question, but they're trying to trick you all the time. The ACT, they're not trying to trick you. So it kind of depends on what you think your child needs, or take them both and just see how it goes. Then definitely take the PSAT test fall of 11th grade year, and then in the spring, take the SAT or ACT test as well. That's what can be used for college applications. If you want to retake those tests, your senior year in the fall is ideal. You can do it in the spring too, but the fall is ideal. It's really super important to take practice tests. We did not spend a lot of money on a private tutor. You can get private tutoring and spend quite a bit of money for those services. My son actually went on after college to be a private tutor for SAT tests. And in order to be a tutor, you have to score very, very high, basically 100% in all the areas. And so he ended up doing that for a company. It's amazing what they can charge. But there's other ways to do it. You can sign up for online questions. You can do online, I think $30 for the year. You can take online practice exams. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Basically, prepping for college doesn't start in 9th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. It really starts right away when they're younger, and having a really good foundation of love for learning and curiosity and encouraging that. And then each year upping the expectations, just like more freedoms should not go up unless there's more responsibility attached. So every year evaluate your child in different areas of growth and up their responsibilities and up their freedoms if they are being responsible with those choices. So being ready is not just about academics, it's about personal character and responsibility and integrity and having a strong moral value system. But I think based on the question, you're looking at predominantly the testing aspect, correct?
Yeah, a bit. Just because I know that's something that a lot of people worry about is, the academic aspect of getting ready for college, especially in relation to homeschooling.
Right. There's some really great transcript services. I mean, you can go to heave.org. There's a lot of different online services that will help you. But you can also just look things up yourself and in a book and say, okay, this is what's typically done. They have these 4 or 5 core subjects, plus we pick these electives. What's reflected on the transcript is any high school credit bearing course. So it's not uncommon for students to start taking high school credit bearing courses, not just at 9th grade, but with languages, 7th grade, 8th grade. That's not uncommon. I mean, if you want to wait till 9th grade, that's fine, but it's not uncommon. Or if you're starting with pre-algebra, 7th grade, well, by the time they hit 8th grade, it's algebra. It's a high school credit bearing course. And it depends on your student and their goals, your goals for them, their trajectory, what, based on who they are and what you want to see. we started a little sooner because we knew we wanted to get to the advanced level of math. We wanted to get through certain things. Another thing that that helped us a lot for homeschooling is my kids did do a lot of dual enrollment their junior and senior years in high school. So we paid for classes, which weren't very expensive at the Northern Virginia Community College, and paid for the books. It's kind of neat. They take a test and they kind of get evaluated for math and for English. And at the end of this computer test, and it's timed, I think it's a couple hours. They're both timed. A report gets spit out basically, which says all the different math classes they qualify for. And it's neat because, you know, you see 3-4 different choices and it all kind of makes sense. Okay, based on this kind of progress, this is the next step. I hope I'm covering basically what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay. I did want to add one thing about the SAT versus ACT. If your child ever has a specific college in mind, definitely check to see what they require, because some colleges will require one but not the other, and vice versa. Right. Yeah, so that's kind of important to keep an eye out for if they have a specific college in mind.
Right, and that's why practicing time testing is a big deal, especially, you know, starting with, you know, the 9th grade, take the PSAT. You could do it at home, you know, even in 7th or 8th grade, and just realize they haven't covered all the subject matter, but it's going to get their brain thinking in that way, because if you keep taking tests over and over again, you get an idea of what they're trying to ask. Now, the content may change when you're actually taking the SAT test, but if you've seen a problem that's really similar to it, it's just they changed the name, they changed the numbers, you know. So just it's more learning the concept of how to do the problem, how to analyze it, how to walk it out.
Yeah, what they're kind of looking for. And one other thing with the SAT and ACT that I was told years ago is make sure you know which one will mark you, if you guess incorrectly, will mark you negative points. One of them will penalize you for being wrong, and the other one will not. So
right.
I don't remember which is which, but
right. And then you need to look at the colleges that you're interested in or universities that you're applying to. Some of them, if you get a better SAT score, you can replace it. Yeah. Old one. Others will average it. Some will super score and take the best top score. Like if you turn in your ACT and then you take it again, you turn in your score, they'll say, oh, you did better in science and you did better over here. Okay, we're going to take the top scores from the subject area. Yeah, it's called super scoring. So I think that is very important to look at, is what is the expectation of the university or college that you're interested in.
Yep. All right. So I guess the only other thing with that aspect is, well, Angela, did you have anything to add? You're kind of getting towards that part, so I know you're not really in it yet.
I just, you know, a lot of people worry about homeschoolers getting into college, you know, like our education is less than, you know, what's in the public school. And I mean, I don't want to be biased, but I you know, I feel like, you know, I mean, your homeschool students are going to be, most of them, you know, more dedicated to their, you know, their education, you know, especially if we've taught them, you know, that, you know, the love of learning and things like, they're going to be more responsible for their education, in my opinion. And this is not a blanket statement because everybody is different, but they're going to be more have just a feeling of more responsibility than, say, a public school student. I went to public school for all of my school history, and I went straight into Nova. I knew what my goal was, but I wanted to be a teacher. But a community college was a lot cheaper than going straight, to a university. And I was surprised, I was the youngest in almost all of my classes, and they were all in-person classes. And to see, these people in their early 20s who just weren't serious about their work. I was so thankful to get scholarships and, financial aid to get to go to college. And, maybe that's where it was different. I don't know, but people strolling in late, or, yeah, we got a test tomorrow, and I couldn't believe the attitudes that I was seeing towards their education. I'm like, no one's making you be here. I mean, maybe I can't even say their parents were making them be there, because, they're in their early 20s. These aren't 17, 18-year-olds all sitting in a room, and then we had people who were changing careers. So then we had some older people in there too. They're probably my age, and I'm saying older people, but my age now. But good for them. But I'm just saying that, I was just surprised at the attitudes that I was seeing. I'm like, somebody is paying for you to be here, and that they didn't take their education seriously. And like Faith mentioned, a lot of homeschoolers do dual enrollment. So you can have a lot of credits under your belt by the time you've graduated high school, a lot of college credits, by the time that you graduate.
About a year's
right.
worth, 35 credits or something.
So you're halfway to an associate's, right there, and you just graduated high school. And so I just, there's a lot of pluses there in homeschooling. We keep talking about college. That's not their the route that everyone's going to take, and and that's okay too. We're just talking about the prep for that because that's the purpose of this talk, right? But there are trade schools, and there are a lot of other options out there, on the job training and things like that your child can do. Those places may want to see some sort of test, or they might have their own kind of test that you need to take. And so it's good to be familiar with those standardized tests. That's kind of all I have to say about that, because again we are still in the earlier stages. It's hard for me to think I'm going to have a teenager next year and stuff, but I think, I know people whose kids are 5 and they're like, what about college? And it's great to plan ahead, but don't lose focus of where you are, and and just enjoy where you are, and help, you can have that in the back of your mind. By the time your 5-year-old is old enough to go to college, things might be totally different in the world. Who knows what what jobs are going to look like and stuff. So don't focus so much on the future that you're not focusing on the present. And
it's a balance. It's a balance, to what percentage, do you just kind of live in the moment? I remember rolling oranges and apples around, for counting and doing all these things on the floor with the kids when they were really little, and just having so much fun. But I think you're right. Not losing the energy and the enjoyment of where you're at is so important.
Yeah, and being in public school, even when I was in high school, there was a lot of pressure from the school, not from my parents. Right. Of, well, you need to go away to a university and you need to do this because you have good grades and this and that. I'm like, I'm not ready to go live in a dorm. That's not the life that, that I want. And I felt like my guidance counselor was just pushing, all of this stuff on me because I was a good student, and I never lived at a dorm, I went to community college for 2 years, and then I went to a local university for 3 years because I got my master's there as well. And and I loved it. And I look back and I'm like, when I told them I was going to community college, it was a sad thing, and so I was surprised because I'm like, hey, I want to go to college. I know what I want to do. I think I'm being smart by saving money, and I went ahead and got my associates because it was just a difference of a few more credits versus just, transferring what I had done for 2 years. But, be supportive of whatever your child wants to do, even though it may not be the path that that you wanted for him or her. And, just see how you can support them, the best way possible. And I think, like Faith said, setting that foundation, you know, back
Mm-hmm.
when they're born, you know, of, you can do this, and learning is fun and enjoyable. It's empowering. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we are running a little bit short on time, but I did have quickly two other questions for you guys. So one, once again, more focused on Faith. How do you go about when they are finishing homeschooling? What do you have to do to wrap it all up to get it? Because if they don't go to college, they might still need to have that high school diploma or equivalent for the job field or a trade school or anything like that.
Well, absolutely. Seniors can have a diploma. It's not hard to custom order a diploma. There's a lot of different companies you can go through, so they can get a diploma, and there's different types of diploma, ones with honors, and yeah, so that's not a big deal. We've always joined a co-op where there's a formal ceremony, and they've had about 20 to 30 other seniors graduating at the same time. And so it was really special to do that, because they took classes at the co-op 2 days a week that we paid licensed teachers to do specific classes. And I didn't have a problem with that. I think it was really healthy for the kids to learn to listen to other teachers and do their schoolwork. And then I would receive the grade. The transcript has to be made regardless of whether or not they go on to college. That's just part of completing their education, their senior year. So they should have a transcript reflecting their grades for the year. And then I also highly, highly recommend a resume, because on the resume, my kids all had one. It included their job, any work activity that they've done, any volunteer work. All three of my girls volunteered as junior assistants at a hospital, about 100 hours each, and that was nice to put on there. It's just a great way to document, any clubs that they've been a part of, any sports they've been a part of, any leadership roles that they've taken. Did they make it to captain, of the soccer team? We also found online a math honor society to join, a homeschool math honor society. And we also found just a regular honor society, and we didn't have one in the area. So I actually started a chapter of that group. And so it's really interesting what you can find. And all those things go on the resume just to kind of show you're a complete person, because schools don't know you. You have to speak up, and for yourself, you have to come up with documentation that shows you, hopefully, as a complete person. You have wide variety of interests. You've done this, you've done that. We dabbled in, theater, and we did a play together, community theater, as a family, and it was really fun. Peter Pan. Yeah. And the kids got different roles and had different lines to memorize, and we all did singing and dancing together. We did choir together. We did there's a community choir, Gainesville Community Choir, starting up in August, and I think students have to be in 9th grade to join that. But it's really neat, because it's 9th grade all the way through people in their 60s.
Uh-huh.
And we have a lot of fun together, just singing a variety of songs and doing performances twice a year. So I guess I went off giving examples, but the importance of a resume is the point I was trying to make.
Yeah,
And
no, thank you. Yeah.
I think we're so ingrained of what what school looks like, with the parties and the awards, and, at the end of the year, which I always looked forward to that when I was in public school, if they've never been in public school, they don't know what they're missing. If you want to, feel like they're missing out on things, you can recreate it yourself, there's especially nowadays, there's a lot out there where, again, my goal is not try to recreate what's going on in the public schools, but for high school graduation, yes, we definitely plan to do that. I think Heave does one, there are organizations around, you can do the cap and gown and do the whole thing. And so we definitely plan on doing that. But clubs, honor society, these are things that as homeschoolers we can still be a part of. It just takes a little bit more legwork and trying to find out where those places are. And if you can't find it, like Faith said, create it, find out how you can create it in your area, or maybe you have something from scratch, you're coming up with. But don't think just because it's not out there that it's not an option.
Yeah, great. So that brings me to my last question. Any other tips or tricks that you have for new or even existing parents that are kind of looking into these things in regards to the milestones and documentations?
Could I throw out another what is it called? The religious exemption.
Oh, right.
Because that is an option. So instead of sending out a notice of intent to your school board, you would do a religious exemption. And then Heave, of course, we throw that Heave out a lot, has a great way of explaining that. And Virginia is the only state, as far as I know, that allows for a religious exemption. And it's basically, I'm just going to read it off of their site so I get it right. For parents who have sincere convictions against sending their children to school. And so you don't have to be a Christian to have those sincere convictions. I know that there are agnostics, to Christians who have this view. It's something that's not to be taken lightly. And it really has to be a personal conviction, not I don't like the politics or I don't like the superintendent, or whatever. HSLDA is a great help in that. You're not going to find like a form letter online because it's about your personal convictions. So it's not like an NOI where you're just going to find this form. But HSLDA and Heave get very helpful in helping you walk through that. Once you do that and you are, I always say, approved, because we are telling them that we're homeschooling. We're telling them, we're claiming religious exemption. But once it's approved, then you don't need to send proof of progress to the school anymore. And so you are in some ways not considered a homeschooler in the eyes of the school district, because you are free from compulsory attendance in the public schools. So it's a little different option to choose. You are still homeschooling, you're still teaching your child, you can still do your own tests and evaluations and things like that. You just won't have to report anything to your school district. So it's a little bit different. But as far as tips and tricks, it can be overwhelming. I think we can also make it more overwhelming than it is. Again, I think I say this almost every time, take time to do your research, give yourself grace, get around people who have been there, before. I think it's been great that we've had people on both ends of the spectrum for these talks. And, don't isolate yourself, believe in yourself. You can do it. There's a lot of information out there. Heave, you can call Heave and get help from them, even if you are not a paid member. So, so that's an option. I would highly suggest supporting and being a paid member of Heave and HSLDA. But, you're not in a box. There are a lot of people who want to help you. And I really think it comes down to believing in yourself, because, if you want to do it, you can do it.
I like what you said, Angela.
Oh, thanks.
Believe in yourself. And I like that.
Mm.
Something I've seen some families do is they write out a mission statement and they post it. Basically, why are we doing what we're doing?
Yes.
And it's just something that reinforces the mission over and over again. This is what we're doing we're doing this type of schooling because this is what we believe. It was interesting. If you look in history, public school is actually really fairly new. It's a couple hundred years old.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep going back before then, how did kids learn? Wow, how did they learn? Most of them grew up on farms. They worked with their families and they saw their dad and their mom working the farm in different ways, working together. They had chores to do. They learned to read from their parents. And the goal of reading was to be able to read the Bible. And it's very interesting to take a look at the history of schooling. Public school seems like this big institution that's always been there and it's strong and mighty, but it hasn't. And if you look back at people who have been world changers and influencing our government and influencing our world, inventors, they learned from their parents. They learned from their families. Mm-hmm. And they learned to work and think, and they learned about respect and about character. It's the whole package. And so anyway, that's another encouragement that you can do it. Just to remember that your values matter and character really matters, because this is something I've always told my kids, is that my goal for you is for when you walk into a room, you may not know exactly what's going on, but because of your tool belt, your character tool belt, you can pull on those tools. For example, the tool of initiative. You know how to look somebody in the eye and shake their hand and say hello. You know how to look around and see if you can be helpful. You know how you can pull out another tool of, being honest. These character qualities will go far. And so then they can be utilized in numerous situations, and they're not. So building strong character, I think, is where it's at. And realizing that parents have been teaching their kids for a very long time. This is not a new concept.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Great. Well, thank you both. So we're going to end our talk today. We went a little bit over, but great information. I really appreciate it. Our next table talk about homeschooling is next week on July 15th. Unlike the previous ones that we've been doing, this one is actually going to be a presentation put on by Heave, kind of about getting started. So we've talked about Heave a lot in this one. So this is it might be your first introduction to them, and they will be coming next week to talk about what you really need to know to homeschool, but basically steps to getting started. So that will be at noon next Thursday, July 15th.